The year is 479 BC. The god king has fled. His mighty fleet, once the terror of the seas, now lies shattered and broken in the watery grave of Salamis. A lesser man might have believed the war was over, but this was not the end. It was merely the end of the beginning. Before he abandoned his ambition, Xerxes left behind a wounded beast, a coiled viper waiting in the heart of Greece. He left his finest general, Mardonius, and with him, an army of immortals, the very elite of his vast empire. Mardonius was no arrogant king, blinded by pride. He was a patient predator, a cunning and experienced commander who understood a profound truth. The Greek alliance was a miracle of fear, a fragile chain of rival cities. He knew that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And so, he did not attack with steel, but with whispers. He spent the long winter tempting Athens, offering them gold, power, and a privileged place in the Persian world. All they had to do was break the chain, surrender. The Athenians' reply was etched not in ink, but in sacrifice. They sent their women and children away to safety, abandoning their homes for a second time. Their answer was clear. The fate of Greece would not be decided in the halls of diplomacy. It would be settled on the battlefield, in a final, bloody chapter of the war. A brutal, head-to-head clash of civilizations. With his diplomatic games failed, Mardonius marched. He chose to ground himself near the sleepy town of Plataea, wide, open plains, perfect for the thunderous charge of his greatest weapon, the formidable Persian cavalry. His force was a vision of imperial might, nearly 100,000 of the empire's finest warriors. In response, Greece answered with a miracle. From every corner of the Hellenic world that had not bent the knee, soldiers marched. They assembled the largest hoplite army ever seen. At its heart, a river of crimson and bronze. 10,000 Spartans, the deadliest warriors on earth, led by their regent, Pausanias. Alongside them stood the Athenians, the Corinthians, the Megarians, a brotherhood of free men, 80,000 strong. And so they gathered, two worlds, two futures. For 2 long weeks, the largest armies ever to face each other in ancient Greece stood separated by the quiet waters of the Esopus River. A sea of bronze staring down an empire of gold, each waiting for the other to make a single fatal mistake. And so began the War of Nerves. For 2 long weeks, the sun rose and set on this tableau of silent violence. 100,000 men on one side of the river, 80,000 on the other. An empire and a civilization, holding their breath. Pausanias, the Spartan, was a rock of caution. He knew his hoplites were invincible in a head-on clash, but he also knew that to cross the river and charge into the open plains would be suicide. It would be feeding his men to the wolves of the Persian cavalry. And Mardonius, patient as a hunting wolf himself, refused the bait. Why break his army on a wall of bronze shields when he could bleed them slowly? He unleashed his serpent, the formidable Persian cavalry led by the brilliant Mecistius. Day after day, they were a constant, tormenting presence. They thundered along the riverbank, a storm of arrows and javelins, launching lightning-fast raids to pick off Greek foragers. They were not trying to win the war in a day. They were trying to win it by 1,000 cuts, chipping away at the Greek resolve. In one furious skirmish, the Megarian contingent found themselves surrounded, about to be swallowed whole by the Persian horsemen. Only a desperate charge by Athenian archers saved them. In the chaos, an arrow found its mark, and the great commander Mecistius fell. A major blow to Persian morale. The Greeks had drawn first blood, but Mardonius was playing a larger, deadlier game. He sent his cavalry on a wide, sweeping maneuver, not at the Greek army, but behind it. They had one target, the supply lines. And most critically, they found and choked the Gargantuan spring, the single source of water for 80,000 thirsty men. It was a masterstroke of strategy, a simple move that brought the largest army in Greek history to its knees. Without food, and now without water under the hot Boeotian sun, the Greek position collapsed. Pausanias was forced into the one maneuver a general fears most, a retreat at night in the face of the enemy. To move such a vast, multinational army in the dark is to invite chaos. And chaos came. The retreat shattered into confusion. The Greek center, moving too quickly, marched far beyond its objective, vanishing into the night. The Athenians on the left became dangerously separated, and the Spartans on the right flank, stubborn and proud, refused to move until they were certain the others were safe, their honor dictating they be the last to withdraw. As dawn broke, a pale light spread across the valley. Mardonius looked out from his camp and saw a sight he could only describe as a gift from the gods. The formidable Greek army was gone. In its place, a scattered, broken line of men, seemingly in full panic flight. Victory, he believed, was his for the taking. With a triumphant shout, he gave the order. His elite Persian infantry, the Immortals, surged across the river in pursuit. Mardonius had made a fatal miscalculation. The Spartans were not fleeing. The Spartans do not flee. They were repositioning. Seeing the Persian wave charging towards them, Pausanias gave the order. The Spartans and their Tegean allies turned as one. The ranks closed. The spears lowered. 10,000 men became a single, living wall of interlocking bronze shields and 9-foot spears. This was a moment for which every Spartan lived and trained since birth. What followed was not a battle. It was a collision of worlds. The confident, shouting Persians, with their wicker shields and shorter spears, crashed into the silent, immovable Spartan phalanx. The fighting was a horrific, grinding intimacy of death. The Persians, incredibly brave, grabbed at the long Spartan spears, trying to snap them, try and create any opening in that deadly wall of points. But for every spear they broke, another took its place. The Spartan line did not bend. It did not break. For what felt like an eternity, the two sides were locked in a horrific meat grinder, a churning mass of stabbing spears and desperate courage. And then, in the heart of the chaos, the turning point, the linchpin of the entire Persian war machine. Mardonius, fighting like a common soldier from his white charger, was struck. He fell, and with him fell the will of his army. The death of their charismatic general was a blow from which there was no recovery. The Persian center, the heart of the army, was torn out. Panic, that infectious disease of battle, spread like wildfire. They broke. They fled, a terrified mob, streaming back toward the wooden walls of their fortified camp. On the other side of the field, the Athenians, locked in their own desperate struggle with Mardonius's Greek allies, finally smashed their opponents. The battle had transformed. The desperate defense was over. The hunt had begun. From all across the plain, the entire Greek army converged on the Persian camp. The Spartans, masters of the open field, struggled to breach the fortress walls. It fell to the Athenians, with their grim experience in siege warfare, to finally smash through the gates. What followed was not a battle. It was a slaughter. The trapped, leaderless, and demoralized Persian army was cornered. Of the vast, magnificent army that Mardonius had led out of Asia, only a bloodied, terrified fraction would ever see their homes again. The rest lay dead in the fields and ditches of Plataea. The Battle of Plataea was not just a victory. It was an extermination. It was a final, decisive nail hammered into the coffin of the Persian invasion of mainland Greece. This was a victory of ideals forged in steel. A victory of the disciplined phalanx over the chaotic charge. A victory of the free citizen soldier over the loyal subject of an empire. And as if the gods themselves had written this final chapter, legend tells us that on the very same day, leagues away across the Aegean, the Greek navy won a crushing victory at Mycale, burning the remnants of the Persian fleet on the shores of Asia Minor. The twin victories were a symphony of destruction. The serpent had not just been wounded, its head had been severed. The threat that had loomed over the Hellenic world for a generation, a shadow that threatened to extinguish the flickering candle of Western civilization, was finally, irrevocably, over. The victory at Plataea did more than just end a war. It secured a future. It guaranteed the independence of Greece and unleashed the golden ages of Athens and Sparta. It created the space for philosophy to flourish, for democracy to take root, for art and architecture to reach heights the world had never seen. The world we live in today was built upon the foundations laid by the men who stood their ground on that fateful morning. The battlefield was littered with the unimaginable wealth of the Persian camp: gold, silver, luxurious tents, and silks. But as the survivors stood amidst the carnage, They knew the true prize won that day could not be held in their hands. It was the air they breathed. It was the right to shape their own destiny. It was something far more precious than gold. It was freedom,